Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has reignited a debate many in Europe's eastern flank have long grappled with. As the United States signals shifts in foreign policy priorities, how certain can Europe be about NATO's security guarantees against Russia? Joining me now here on World Talks to discuss is Renata Mienkowska-Norkienė, political expert at Team Europe Direct. Renata, so happy to have you here with us on World Talks. Now, before we begin, I just want to ask...
Thank you so much for the invitation.
I want to ask, what are some of the key takeaways at the informal EU meeting, a gathering of leaders in Cyprus?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the question of defense, because, you know, it is something that has accompanied us for a few years already, but it comes to a point in which I think we all realize that the threat is really serious, and the Prime Minister Donald Tusk, he has underlined it in his press conference that it might be months when it may come to some kind of serious threat from Russia, or serious diversion act, or even attack, which might be a cyber attack connected to some diversion. Different things may happen, but it's not a question of years, but months. Therefore, there was a discussion, and it was present, obviously, quite intensely on Article 42.7, which might actually sort of strengthen our belief that in case anything wrong happens to one of the member states, the others will be able to support the attacked country within Article 42.7 if NATO, for one reason or another, but another would be probably inaction of the United States, wasn't interested in clear support of one of the states. So that was definitely one of the topics, and the United States was a sort of present there, but of course we know it wasn't present. Officially. And also we had discussions about the question of the forthcoming multi-annual financial framework, which was a very important topic because it shows quite clearly the divisions within the European Union, but those divisions, you know, they are always there when we talk about such significant, such important aspects as how much money to spend, you know, in this perspective 2028-34. And therefore, of course, the frugal 4, actually now it's like a frugal 7, frugal 8, including Germany and the Netherlands, as usually Austria. They want the European Union's budget within multi-annual financial framework to be not too ambitious, while the opposite opinion is shared by countries like Poland, for example, or the Baltic states. We also had discussions quite intense on one Europe, one market. So it was about strengthening, of course, the competitiveness of the European Union and a little bit more of a share of small and medium enterprises. And last but not least, apart from, of course, the question of Ukraine as well, but let's put it into this Russian threat and including Ukraine also in the European Union's perspective of enlargement, which might also not be as easy as we might think. There was the question of the Middle East and and the war there. And again, the United States was present there as political states, even though, of course, it wasn't, but it was everywhere. And the spirit of Donald Trump was present in a sense that the European Union has, for these, 50-something days of the war in the Middle East, in Iran, has spent 25 billion euros more than it could have without the war, of course, on fossil fuels. So it's a serious problem for the European Union, and some solutions have to be found. And that was the subject of those talks within those 2 days in Nicosia.
Renata, you laid it down quite wonderfully there, and now I'm going to go back to some of your points here.
It's a lot of topics, but that was the case. Huh?
But it is very important. I mean, you've mentioned a lot of the factors and really gave us like an entire wrap up of this of this conference that took of this gathering that took place, right? About all these the situation that's shaping our region and far beyond. Renata, but let me ask you this first. Now, very important here, particularly for our region, particularly for Poland. I just want to go back a little bit to Prime Minister Donald Tusk's words. Now, Tusk says Poland, of course, is one of Washington's closest allies, and he's questioning now whether support would actually hold in a real crisis coming from the United States. Let me ask you this. Do you think the fact that, this is coming out from Donald Tusk, is this actually going to somehow undermine U.S.-Poland relations?
If it was me to tell you really honestly how to put Poland's relations in the future vis-a-vis the United States as our, closest ally in case of any threat, I would say it's not a predictable ally. Therefore, we should obviously have plan B in case of inaction of the United States. Donald Tusk cannot say it clearly, but he can obviously draw Europeans' attention because he said it, of course, during the press conference, but this was the topic during the meeting, the meeting of the European Union's leaders. And, the point of this summit was also not to send the signal that the United States cannot be trusted anymore, but at the same time, even without saying so, showing that the European Union does understand it, actually. And, I think Donald Tusk doesn't send a clear signal that we cannot trust the United States anymore, but he also tells America, we understand that if you don't act, we are not sentenced to death. Okay, that we will try to use our own mechanisms. This mechanism under Article 42.7, it will be established quite soon. Till the end of 2027, we should have all this operationalized, because obviously just this article is quite general, but it's still in line, with the United Nations charters and so on and so forth. But, within this whole instability, when we cannot really say what the United States will do tomorrow, not to speak about, a few months, and of course there are elections approaching, I think that even Poland, although Donald Tusk, I think he really tries to maintain in rhetorics, of course, this strong alliance and loyalty to the United States, he also has to send signals that he's sober and very rational and pragmatic in seeing all this. So I don't think it sends a clear signal to the United States. They will not read it this way. Donald Trump doesn't care about these signals anymore. He may say, like with Meloni, for example, it's not a good guy anymore, but so what? I'm pretty honest now, but that's exactly the case. So I think that what really was a big effort of this summit was not to, of course, undermine relations with the United States, but at the same time was really strong discussions about necessity to have a strong plan B. And it seems that this plan B on the basis of Article 42.7 will be there. It's also a signal sent to the Europeans, that there is an alternative, because Europeans are deeply concerned about the question whether the United States will help us. And you can see it in opinion polls among the European societies. They support Donald Trump less and less. And actually, there is, this moment of losing delusions about the United States, losing illusions or delusions. Yeah, you name it.
Renata, I mean, I do have to interrupt you there for 1 second. I just want to go back to what you said. You're saying that, Donald Trump probably doesn't care about, what Donald Tusk said or whatnot. But here we have White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly saying, and I'm going to quote her, saying, President Trump has made clear his disappointment with NATO and other allies. The United States maintains thousands of troops in Europe and yet requests to use military bases to defend American interests have been rejected. So what do we make out of this? So in a sense here, here we have, Trump not caring, yet we have his staff, saying otherwise. So how do we, do you think this is maybe mixed signals, or how should we interpret this in this case?
I mean, I didn't say really that he doesn't care at all, but look at this statement even. It's quite general. I mean, it generally refers to those allies of the United States. So allies, of course, in defense, because NATO, just to remind all of you, it's a defense alliance. It means that we don't support attack on another country which doesn't have any backing in a United Nations Charter and so on and so forth. So this is a signal sent by Trump and his administration generally to the NATO countries. I would say that if I would to pick up which countries the signal was strongest, let's say, to be understood the strongest, it would be Spain, probably also Great Britain, because these are the countries which didn't support Donald Trump directly by, of course, providing the United States with access to those bases. But on the other hand, I mean, of course, Donald Trump sends a signal that this whole Middle East war that he launched alongside, of course, with Israel, that this is something that disappointed him because the NATO countries didn't immediately join him and, didn't go for implementing his own goals, which goals, just to be quite clear, are not in line with the European Union's goals. The opposite, right. I would say, in many aspects, because if we take into consideration Russia and strengthening of Russia because of problems within the Strait of Hormuz, and of course, rocketing prices of oil, and gas, this is not something that's in line with the European Union's goals and NATO allies of the United States goals. So I think now the United States loses a proper understanding of what NATO is for. But also, of course, it may be a moment of truth for everyone in NATO and, a moment of asking questions about how to set up our really loyal and sincere relations within the alliance in the future. And this will be a tough challenge for all of us.
Renata, I do have about 1 minute and a half left to end this episode of World Talks, and I really, really want to ask you this last question. Donald Tusk warned a Russian threat could come in months, not years. I want to hear it from you. Do you think that this is a realistic warning?
I do think so. Yes, because, he wouldn't say it without a reason, because the point of him is definitely not to, put the panic on the table of either way, a tough agenda, both within the European Union and within the NATO. So I think he must know from his allies, from our allies, something that we might not be fully aware of. And let's be clear about that. It does not necessarily have to mean, rockets and drones here, but it may be cyber attacks together with some diversion actions. This can happen, and it can happen, of course, in the Baltic states, because these are the most, I would say, vulnerable here, but also in Poland and maybe in some other countries. So yes, I think this threat is absolutely real, in particular since Putin seems to lose in a few fronts. Not only the war front, but also within his own country, vis-a-vis his people and middle class and all the.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Renata Mienkowska-Norkienė. That's all the time that we have for today on this episode. Political expert, Team Europe Direct. Thank you so much for all your input with us here on such important topics that are shaping our region. And thank you for watching this episode of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. I'll see you next time.